Welcome. Today we're going to be looking at the cooler and earthier side of the Vinci Paint Co watercolors by using their sample set that I picked up. And we're going to be starting from phthalo blue, moving through the blues, the greens into earth tones, and then the neutrals in this video. If you're interested in seeing the yellows, oranges, reds, and violets and some of the warmer blues, that's in the previous video. And I also went over some of the reasons why I picked up this set, but I might go over those again a little bit in this video and perhaps cover some other reasons I didn't mention. One of the main reasons I did mention is that the sample sizes are large enough that I can do swatching, but then have loads of paint left behind in order to do some small illustrations or paintings in order to really understand the pigments before I decide whether I want to invest in one or if I want to change out any pigments I already have once I've used them up. But we're starting off first with phthalo blue, and this is PB15, very good. Light fastness, fully transparent, staining, and granulates some. And this is a really pretty blue. I do actively use phthalo blue green shade in my recent palette, but I'm not sure whether or not I would intentionally switch out for this phthalo blue quite yet. Next we have French ultramarine red shade, PB29, excellent light fastness, fully transparent, and very granulating. They have 3 ultramarines in here, and I'm really excited to get to know the differences between the 3 of them. So the one I'm swatching at the moment is just ultramarine blue, PB29, excellent, transparent, and granulates well as well. And then the next one after this is ultramarine green shade, which again is PB29, excellent, transparent, but in this case it only granulates some. So we have red shade, a middle ultramarine blue, which is just called ultramarine blue, and then ultramarine green shade, which is what I'm about to do now. So you can see on camera that there's a tiny bit of a difference between all 3 of these. It was really interesting to try out a green shade ultramarine. I haven't really come across one before, I don't think, when I have tested out dot cards in the past. Now I'm dipping into cerulean blue genuine, which is PB36. It's a hazardous pigment, excellent, opaque, and it granulates some. I use cerulean blue chromium, which is PB36, on my current palette, and I use it as a special effect pigment. This is a really pretty PB36, and I want to do more testing with it to determine whether this would be something I would switch out or not. Now we're looking at cerulean blue hue. So this is a mixture of PB15 and PW6. It is very good. It is semi-transparent and staining. So this is a mixture of phthalo blue and a white pigment. And I'm not too fond of going for hues that have white mixed in when I'm working with watercolor, but it is a very pretty hue. Then we have Sea and Sky. Again, this is a PB15 mixed with a PW6 white. It's very good semi-opaque this time in staining. It's very pretty, but probably not one that I would actively choose to put in my palettes. Then we have Manganese Blue Mix, which is a mixture of PB33 and PB15. This is hazardous. It's very good, transparent, and very granulating. This is a gorgeous blue. It's a mixture of PB33, which is where the hazardous element comes in, and phthalo blue. And now you're seeing me apply Prussian blue green shade, a mixture of PB27 and PG7. This is excellent, transparent, staining, and granulates some. This is a gorgeous color. I have a real soft spot for Prussian blue mixtures, and this is no different, but I probably wouldn't add it on my palette when I can just have a Prussian blue. But next we have one I'm really interested in, which is phthalo turquoise, PB16. Excellent, transparent, and staining. I've used phthalo turquoises in the past that are the mixture of phthalo blue green shade and phthalo green blue shade, but not the single pigment version, which is this PB16. Gorgeous, and I really, really want to test this one out. Then we have Charlie O Blue, which is what I'm currently applying. This is a mixture of PB15:4, PG7, and PW6. So this has white in it, which gives it that opaque quality. It's excellent, fully opaque, staining and granulating 2, which is the granulates a lot category. Although it's a pretty blue on its own, it's not one that has qualities that I'm looking for in my painting practice at the moment. And next we have Sea Glass, which is a mixture of PB15:4 and PG7. So this is in that realm of phthalo turquoise that's a mixture of a blue and a green phthalo. And this is excellent, transparent and staining, gorgeous colour. I am trying to figure out at the moment what phthalos I want on my palette. Do I want a phthalo blue and a phthalo green? Do I want to have a third phthalo in there that is a phthalo turquoise? Do I want single pigment? And is it worth me having that middle ground if I have the blue and the green? These are all questions I want to ask myself in my painting practice at the moment. But now we're moving on to the next box, which is some teals, greens, and the yellow earth tones. First up, we have Cobalt Turquoise, PB36, hazardous, excellent, opaque, and very granulating. And then following that is Cobalt Turquoise Deep, which is exactly the same. It's also PB36, hazardous, very granulating, excellent, and opaque. These are both really gorgeous colors. And especially for the first one here, the Cobalt Turquoise, I don't really have a hue on my palette that is similar to this, and I've considered in the past whether I want to add a Cobalt Turquoise or a Cobalt Teal on my palette. I try and limit down the hazardous pigments on my palette to just a few so that I can keep an eye on when I'm using them and making sure that I am doing a healthy painting practice and taking precautions when I'm painting. And I always and ah over whether I want to add another hazardous pigment on top of that. I probably wouldn't have the Cobalt Turquoise Deep, which is the last one that I've applied, because I can probably just get away with using the phthalo turquoise or mixture of the green and blue. Then we have Cobalt Green Hue. This is PG7 mixed with PB27, so that's Prussian blue. This is excellent, opaque, and granulates some, so that's the last one that I applied on the paper. Very pretty colour, but probably not one that I would find practical on my palette. Then we have Viridian Green. This is a pigment that I use all the time. It's PG18. This is a hazardous one that I have. It is excellent, transparent, and very granulating. I use this as a special effect green. It's very, very, very granulating in mixtures. And I use both True Viridian, this Viridian, and Phthalo Green PG7, which is the next one coming up. This is excellent, transparent, staining, and granulates some. So I have both of these on my palette, even though they're very similar hues. The Phthalo Green does get much deeper, as you can see on the paper, but I use them for their strengths. The Viridian Green is very granulating, and I use it as a special effect pigment, whereas the Phthalo Green I use more for just my mixing, my everyday mixing green. Now we have Phthalo Green Yellow Shade, PG36, excellent, transparent, staining, and granulates some as well. This is one that I haven't really explored much in my painting journey. It's a very useful green, but I've found that I do just fine having PG7 and my Azo green, which will be coming up later. And I haven't really felt a need for a yellow shade, but I'm probably going to at least get to know it a little bit better through using these sample sets. The paint that I just applied is the Hooker's Green Dark. This is PG7 mixed with PY42. Excellent, semi-transparent staining and granulating one. An interesting mixture of pigments, but probably not one that I would be interested in adding on my palette. Then we have Emerald Permanent. This is PG36 mixed with PW6, so that phthalo green yellow shade but mixed with white. Excellent, semi-opaque and staining. This is again one that I wouldn't really use just because I keep my gouache process separate from my watercolour process, and I don't tend to go for pigments that are already pre-mixed with white. I don't really like how they interact with other pigments as much, at least at the moment in my practice. Now we have Perylene Green. This is one that I'm really wanting to try and test out in some paintings. This is PBK31. It's a black pigment. It granulates some. It's staining, transparent, and very good light fastness. And we have Denise's Green, a mixture of PY129, which is that azo green I was talking about, mixed with PB60, Indanthrone Blue. Very good, semi-transparent, and granulates some. These are both gorgeous colours, the Perylene Green and the Denise's Green. The Denise's Green I wouldn't go for just because I have both of these pigments on my palette, but I'm definitely interested in trying out the Perylene Green. Now we have Chromium Oxide Green, PG17. Excellent, opaque, staining, granulating, one, and hazardous. This is one of those really earthy greens. One that I would maybe be interested in at least learning about, but I'm not sure whether I'd add it on my palette. Next up we have a classic colour, which is Sap Green. It differs quite a bit brand to brand. This one is a PG7 mixed with PY42. Excellent, semi-transparent, and granulates some. And then we have two more with the same properties. We have Hooker's Green Light, which is also PG7 and a PY42. Excellent, semi-transparent, and granulating some. And then we have an Olive Green, PG7, PY42. Excellent, semi-transparent, staining this time, and granulating one. So we have three convenience greens here with the same pigments and the same properties apart from that olive green being staining. All three of these are really, really lovely pre-mixed greens. I did used to use sap green and olive green in the past. I believe I used the olive green by Senelia and the sap green by Daniel Smith, but I don't really use pre-mixed convenience greens anymore. I tend to just prefer using my own pigments and mixing them in different ratios for different greens. And that's worked out really well for me. Now we have Joyce's Mother Green. This was one I was really excited to try because I loved the Joyce's Mother Violet so much from the last video. And this is PG7, PBR7, and PY42. Excellent, transparent, staining, and granulating one. It wasn't as in love of a moment as the violet, but it's still very pretty. And then the one that I just applied is Green Gold PY129. Very good, transparent and staining. This is the azo green that I use, and I might switch over to this version of the pigment once I've used up what I have at the moment. Then we have Leaf Green, PG7 mixed with PY65. This is very good, transparent and staining. And then we have Mint Green, PG7 and PY3 mixed with PW6 White. Very good, semi-opaque and staining. Again, not one that I probably use. It's one of those pastel tones mixed with a white. Then we have Peach, which is also one of those pastel hues mixed with a white. This is PR188, PY65, PY43, and PW6. So a lot of pigments in this one. It's a really pretty peach. It's very good, opaque and staining, but not one that I'd use. And then we have another classic colour, but not one that I really use, which is Naples Yellow. This is PY35 mixed with PY43. It's hazardous, excellent, semi-opaque, staining, and granulates some. Naples Yellow is just not a colour that I've ever really felt drawn to using or learning about. We also have Naples Yellow Deep here, which is PBR24 mixed with PY53. Also hazardous, excellent, opaque, and very granulating. Again, not one that I'm really interested in trying. I love my yellow earth tones, but I generally stick to my ochres and siennas when it comes to that. And speaking of, we're looking at the yellow ochre. This is PY43. Excellent, semi-opaque, and granulating one. This reminds me a little bit of the Isaro yellow ochre. It's not my preferred hue and properties that I look for in a yellow ochre at the moment, but very pretty nonetheless. Then we have Raw Sienna, PBR7, excellent, semi-transparent and granulating one. I'd potentially be interested in trying out the Raw Sienna and perhaps learning whether or not it's one that I'd want to add. Then we have Nickel Azo Yellow PY150. Hazardous, excellent, transparent and staining. This is one of my pigments that I can't live without at the moment. I love this yellow. It's my main mixing yellow, but I do want to learn more about different types of yellows and yellow pigments and figure out what I want to use moving forward. And now we're moving on to the earth tones and neutrals box. And while I have a moment, one of the reasons why I bought this sample set that I didn't mention before is because we're planning on moving me to the US so that I can be with my partner. And the paints and supplies I currently use in the UK aren't necessarily going to be the best or the cheapest options once I'm in the US. So this has been a brilliant opportunity for me to learn more about the brands and the paints that are going to be available to me over in the US. We're starting off here with gold ochre before I end up losing track. We have PY42 mixed with PY83. This is very good, semi-transparent and staining. This is a gorgeous gold ochre. I'm not sure whether I would use it, but I'll test it out. And then we have new gold, PR101 mixed with PY83. So another one mixed with PY83. Excellent, transparent and granulate some. Also a gorgeous earth tone. I love earth tones and it's been really exciting to try out all the different ones that they offer, including this raw sienna deep. This one is very, very pretty and it's what I would look for in a more yellowish earth tone. It's excellent, fully transparent and granulates some. So I'm looking for that very transparent yellow earth with hopefully a little bit of granulation, but not too much granulation. So that's a really, really appealing yellow earth tone for me. And now we have raw umber natural, which is PBR7. Excellent, transparent, staining and granulates some. Again, interesting, but I think I'd prefer the raw sienna deep. Then we have burnt sienna. This is a gorgeous burnt sienna. It's PBR7, which is my preference for a burnt sienna. It is excellent, transparent, staining and granulates some. Absolutely what I'm looking for in a burnt sienna. I like a little bit of granulation. I like it to be transparent and I like it to be a PBR7. So it's ticking all the boxes there. And I'm currently swatching Burnt Sienna Deep, which is PR101. And this is excellent, transparent, staining and granulates some. I do really love this. I do love PR101s, but I love them for slightly different reasons from the PBR7s. And I do really want to try out that PR101. Now I'm swatching Terracotta, which is PR102. It's very good and semi-opaque. So we're getting into some of the semi-opaque earth tones here. I do love opaque and semi-opaque earth tones, and I usually use them as special effect colours rather than a more everyday mixing colour. This is a gorgeous tone and potentially one I'd be interested in, though there are some other ones coming up that I would prioritise. Now we have Venetian Red, another PR101. It's excellent, semi-opaque, staining and granulates some. This is a really, really lovely red earth tone, but again, it's not one of my favourites in here if I were to prioritise. And then we're going to have Indian Red, another PR101. This is excellent, semi-opaque, staining and granulates some. This is one of the ones that I really, really love and would potentially pick up, but we'll see what I end up deciding through testing in illustrations and paintings. Now we have Brown Madder Quinn, PV19 mixed with PR101. This is very good, semi-transparent, staining and granulates some. Not one that I would intentionally choose when I could just have the individual pigments and mix it myself. Now we have one of the ones that I really, really want to try out. It's gorgeous. This is Violet Iron Oxide, PR101, excellent, semi-opaque, staining and very granulating, and it is definitely very granulating. This is one of the ones I would prioritize learning about and potentially picking up. It's something that's very different from other earth tones I currently own. And now we have Burnt Umber. This is PBR7, excellent, semi-transparent and granulates some. If you watched my previous video in this series, this is one that I've actually picked up a tube of because I've run out of my burnt umber now, and I decided to try out the Da Vinci version because it was on sale and they make really large tubes with 37 milliliters of paint inside. So I thought this was a brilliant opportunity to pick up a Da Vinci paint, and I'm really happy I did. I'm very happy with this hue and I can't wait to switch it out once I've finished off the rest of the paint in my palette. Then we have raw umber, which is what I just applied. It's the last one on the paper. Also PBR7, excellent semi-transparent staining and granulates some. I do want to learn more about raw umber. It's not one that I've really used much of. Then we have sepia, PBK6 mixed with PBR7. Not one that I use too often just because of its being mixed with black. It's excellent semi-transparent and granulates some. And now you're seeing me apply Denise's Grey. This is a gorgeous neutral that I've been wanting to try out. It's a mixture of PB36 and PR101. It's hazardous because of that PB36. Excellent semi-opaque and granulates some. You can definitely see the granulation coming through in this as it dries, and it has just a gorgeous tone to it. Then we have the classic Payne's Grey. This is PBK6 mixed with PB27, so there's that Prussian blue popping up again. It's excellent semi-transparent staining and granulates some. I personally don't use Payne's Grey anymore. I used to when I first started out. It can be quite useful for value studies and things, but it's not something that I reach for in my painting practice anymore. Then we have neutral tint, and in the Da Vinci line, this is a mixture of PBK6, PB15, and PB19. It's very good, semi-transparent and staining. Not my favorite neutral tint. I tend to reach for ones that don't contain black pigments in it. Then we have Ivory Black. This is PBK9, excellent, semi-transparent staining and granulates some. I was very surprised at how light this is. You can see that it goes down almost like a light grey, and I really try and scrub and try and build up some of the value in it, but it's a very, very light valued black. And when I reach in for the next black, which is Lamp Black, you can see how much of a difference there is between the two when it comes to the value. And you'll see that even more so when there's not glare on it. The Lamp Black is PBK6, excellent, opaque and staining. Blacks aren't something I typically reach for anymore. Again, they're useful for some people. It's just not useful in my painting practice at the moment. Then we have Davies Grey. This is usually a green leaning grey, and it's typically mixed with a white pigment. So this is PW6, PBK6, and PG7. It's excellent, semi-opaque and staining. It's a pretty grey, but again, not one that I really reach for. It's not something I find useful in my painting practice at the moment, though I have seen other artists use it to great effect. It's just not for me right now. Then we have the two white pigments, Chinese White, which is PW4 and PW6 mixed together. This is excellent, semi-opaque and hazardous. And then we'll have Titanium White, which is opaque, excellent and staining. And I don't typically reach for whites in watercolour. When I want to bring out white pigments, I just reach for my gouache and mix that in. I do cross my gouache and watercolour sometimes, but when I do, I'm switching into my gouache mindset, if that makes sense. As soon as white is involved, I'm thinking in layers and building up opacity. But anyway, we're done with the swatching of the last half of the Da Vinci full set of watercolours, and this is what they look like dry. I am a sucker for blues. I absolutely adore blues, and it's very hard for me to remember to narrow them down. So if I were to prioritize, I would definitely be interested in trying out the phthalo turquoise, the single pigment, and figuring out if that's something I want to add or not. Potentially the cobalt turquoise as well, maybe. For greens, the one that I'm prioritizing learning about is the perylene green, the black pigment. And I don't normally reach for black pigments, but it's a very interesting green rather than just a neutral black. Then for the earth tones, I want to try out some of the earth yellows, some of the PBR7s and PR101s. I really want to learn about the violet iron oxide. And then for the neutrals, the Denise's Grey, I think is what it's called. Yeah, The Denise's Grey is definitely one that I want to learn more about, but other than that, I'm pretty good on the neutral front. So there's quite a lot to learn about here on this sheet, as well as the previous sheet as too. I'm going to be writing down the names of all of the paints and then probably numbering the swatches, and I'll write it all on the back, and then that way I can keep track of what each of these are. But for now, thank you for watching. If you have any suggestions for paint combinations that I could use in testing out these paints for mini paintings, please leave them in the comments below. If I'm taking suggestions, sometimes people come up with combinations that I wouldn't necessarily think of, and it might be interesting to broaden my painting knowledge by trying out combinations that I wouldn't normally go for. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.